Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. The rain had been falling since dawn, the kind that blurred the city into gray streaks and made everything feel heavier than it already was. From the back seat of the black sedan, Emma Blackwood stared through half-closed eyes, listening to the rhythmic tap of water against glass. To the world, she was the unstoppable CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech empires in the country. To herself, at this moment, she was exhausted beyond words. Meetings, investors, headlines, expectations, none of them paused. Not even for a woman who had worked 3 nights in a row and barely slept. Sitting beside her in the front seat was Daniel Reed, her executive assistant. Most people in the company didn't know much about him, except that he was quiet, efficient, and always on time. They didn't know he was a single dad, waking up before sunrise every day to pack lunches, tie shoelaces, and reassure a little girl that everything would be okay. While he chased a paycheck that barely stretched far enough, Daniel adjusted his seatbelt as the car slowed at an intersection. The driver glanced at the traffic light, hesitated, and then everything happened at once. A blinding flash of headlights, the screech of tires, the violent sound of metal colliding with metal. Emma's head snapped to the side as the car spun. Her phone flew from her hand. Glass shattered. Alarm screamed, and then there was silence, thick and terrifying. When the car finally stopped moving, rain still fell, but the world felt frozen. Emma's ears rang. Pain throbbed in her shoulder, sharp but manageable. She opened her eyes slightly and saw Daniel slumped forward, gripping the dashboard, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The driver was groaning, trying to move. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Emma tested her limbs. She could move, she could think, and that was when a strange instinct kicked in. Emma closed her eyes again and let her body go limp. She didn't know exactly why she did it. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe, deep down, she wanted to know who the people around her really were when they thought she couldn't see or hear. The doctors would later call it adrenaline-fueled clarity, but in that moment, Emma decided to pretend she was unconscious. Ms. Blackwood. Daniel's voice trembled as he turned around. Emma, can you hear me? No response. Daniel's breathing became shallow. He reached back carefully, his hands shaking as he checked her pulse. Okay, stay calm, he whispered, mostly to himself. Help is coming. The driver muttered something about calling an ambulance. Daniel nodded, but his attention never left Emma. Rain seeped through the cracked window, dripping onto the seat. Daniel shrugged off his jacket and gently placed it over Emma's chest to keep her warm. His hands were rough, worn from years of work that had nothing to do with boardrooms. Emma felt the weight of the jacket, the faint smell of detergent and coffee, and something inside her tightened up. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel leaned close to her ear, his voice low and breaking. You're going to be okay. You hear me? You have to be okay. He swallowed hard. You don't even know this, but my daughter looks up to women like you. Strong women. I tell her stories about my boss sometimes, about how she doesn't give up. Emma's heart skipped. She had never heard him talk like this. At work, it was all professionalism and short sentences. Here, in the rain, his words spilled out raw and unfiltered. I can't lose this job. Daniel continued, his voice cracking. Not like this, but that doesn't matter right now. What matters is you. He paused, then laughed bitterly. Funny, right? A billionaire CEO lying unconscious, and her assistant is the one praying out loud. Emma wanted to open her eyes, to tell him she was okay, but she stayed still. Something told her to listen. I became your assistant because I thought it was just a job, Daniel said. A way to pay rent, keep the lights on, make sure my little girl has food on the table. I never thought I'd actually respect someone in this industry. He brushed rainwater from Emma's forehead. But you're different. You don't yell. You don't look down on people. You remember my daughter's name. Sirens grew louder. Daniel's voice grew softer. If you can hear me, I just want you to know something. He took a shaky breath. If this is it, thank you for showing my kid that someone like you can exist. Those words hit Emma harder than the crash itself. For years, she had built walls around herself, believing respect came from power, fear, and success. Yet here was a man with nothing to gain. Speaking from a place of pure honesty, paramedics arrived. Voices urgent, hands moving fast. We have one female, unresponsive, someone said. Daniel stepped back reluctantly, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, he followed, rain-soaked and bleeding. Ignoring his own injury, at the hospital, fluorescent lights replaced rain-soaked darkness. Emma was wheeled into an emergency room. Daniel stopped at the door. I'm her assistant, he said quickly. Please, let me know if she's okay. A nurse nodded distractedly. Daniel sat in the waiting area, his hands clasped together, head bowed. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Emma lay still as doctors checked her vitals. One of them leaned close. She's conscious, he murmured quietly. Emma's eyes fluttered open just a bit. She raised a finger to her lips, barely perceptible. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. She's stable, he said aloud. Minor injuries. We'll monitor her. Emma stayed silent. She wanted more time. Time to understand what she had just heard. Time to process the truth about the people around her. An hour later, Daniel was allowed into the room. He stepped in cautiously, his forehead stitched, his clothes still damp. He froze when he saw Emma's eyes open. "You're awake," he whispered, relief flooding his face. Emma smiled faintly. "I've been awake for a while," she said. Daniel's face flushed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "No," Emma interrupted softly. "Don't apologize." She studied him carefully. "What you said, you meant it." Daniel looked down, embarrassed. "I thought you couldn't hear me." "I know," Emma said. "That's why it mattered." Silence filled the room, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, Emma spoke again. "You're a good father, Daniel." His eyes widened. "How did you talk about your daughter like she's your entire world?" Emma said. "And you treated me like a human being, not a title." Daniel swallowed. "I just did what anyone should do." Emma shook her head slightly. "Not everyone does." Over the next few days, news of the accident spread. Headlines focused on the CEO's recovery. Stock prices stabilized, and meetings were postponed. What didn't make the news was what happened behind closed doors. Emma requested Daniel by her side during recovery, not as an assistant, but as someone she trusted. They talked, really talked, about his struggles as a single dad, about her loneliness at the top, about the cost of success. One afternoon, Emma asked him a question that caught him completely off guard. "Why didn't you leave?" "Leave?" At the scene, she said, "You were injured. You could have focused on yourself." Daniel shrugged. "My dad taught me something before he passed. He said, when things fall apart, you don't run. You stand where you are needed." Emma looked out the window, her eyes misty. "I wish I'd learned that earlier in life." Weeks later, Emma returned to work. The office buzzed with energy, but something had changed. At a company-wide meeting, Emma stood before hundreds of employees and spoke without a script. She talked about the accident, about vulnerability, about people who work quietly in the background, holding everything together. Then she did something no one expected. "I want to recognize someone," she said, gesturing toward Daniel. Not for his job title, but for his character. The room fell silent as Emma shared what he had said. Not word for word, but the heart of it. She spoke about loyalty, empathy, and integrity. Daniel stood frozen, cheeks burning, as applause thundered around him. That day, Emma announced a new initiative: better pay, flexible hours, real support for parents in the company. People whispered, some cried. Daniel felt like he was dreaming. Later, Emma called him into her office. "I heard your words when I thought I couldn't," she said. "They changed me." Daniel shook his head. "I was just being honest." "That's exactly why they mattered," Emma replied. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion offer, a salary that would change his life, and something else, a note written in Emma's handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me who I want to be." Daniel's hands trembled. "I don't know what to say." Emma smiled. "Say you'll keep being you." Years later, people would still talk about the accident that nearly took the life of a powerful CEO. But the real story, the unbelievable part, wasn't the crash. It was the moment a single dad assistant, thinking no one could hear him, spoke from his heart and, unknowingly, changed the course of two lives forever.